You shouldn't marry this guy.
At my wedding, my 6-year-old niece pointed at him and made this declaration. Given that she has shown mysterious abilities since she was 2 years old, her words carry a certain weight, but her sudden statement at such a joyous occasion left me in a panic. As I scrambled to think of a way to handle the situation, she continued speaking.
Because, this guy.
As she kept talking, his face grew paler and paler. I ended up being saved by her mysterious power. My name is Nina, and I'm 28 years old. I live at home with my parents, my older brother, and his 6-year-old daughter, Aileen. My brother lost his wife to illness 3 years ago and moved back home with his then 1-year-old daughter. Aileen had just started walking while holding on to things. It was heartbreaking to watch her call out,
Mommy.
while searching for her mother. Our entire family showered her with love, and she became particularly attached to me. I'm single and work from home as a children's book author, but one of my books became popular, and that led to a significant amount of royalties. Even so, my brother found it strange that I continued to live at home.
You earn enough to buy a condo or even a house, so why don't you try living on your own?
If I move out, I won't be able to see Aileen. I don't want that.
I appreciate how much you care about her, but you won't meet anyone if you stay at home. You should think about your own happiness too.
Despite being young, my brother didn't seem to consider remarrying and was doing his best raising Aileen. As she continued to grow, by the time she turned 2, we began to notice some differences compared to other children. For some reason, she occasionally displayed mysterious powers. For example, when my scatterbrained mother lost her car keys and was searching everywhere, Aileen somehow found them and handed them to her, saying,
Here you go.
Even when asked,
Where did you find them?
Aileen would just smile and not say a word. Another time, when I was about to leave the house on a sunny day, Aileen found an umbrella from somewhere and insisted on stuffing it into my bag. She cried when I tried to leave without it, so I brought it along, and sure enough, a sudden downpour saved me. The most surprising incident happened when my brother was about to drive to work, and Aileen grabbed the car keys and refused to let go, so he had no choice but to take a taxi. That day, there was a massive multi-car accident on the usual route he took. If he had driven off that day, he might have been involved in the accident. My parents and I exchanged worried looks. Despite finding Aileen a bit mysterious, our family always treated her like a normal child. We made sure not to talk about her abilities outside the family to avoid any strange looks from others. She only used her powers to help us, and she was usually just an innocent little girl. One day, I finally had a chance to meet someone new. While I was reading at the library, a man approached me and said,
That book is really interesting, isn't it?
He introduced himself as Kyle, and we quickly hit it off because we shared a love for the same authors. When I mentioned my work as a children's book author, his eyes lit up, and he said,
I've been a fan for a long time. Actually, I recognized you from the author's photo in the back of one of your books, so I thought I'd say hi. I'm really happy to meet you in person.
I'm flattered. I live with my niece, and I create books that I think she would enjoy.
Children's book authors often love kids, right? I adore kids too. I'd love to meet your niece sometime.
I thought it was rare for a single man to be so interested in children's books, but he seemed kind, and more than anything, I was happy that he wanted to meet Aileen.
My books have been well received, and there's even talk of turning them into a series.
Really? That must mean you're earning a good amount of royalties. That's amazing.
As Kyle and I continued to see each other and talk, we eventually started dating, and he proposed to me. When I introduced him to my parents and brother after he dropped me off from a date, they were impressed by his bright and confident demeanor and seemed to like him. However, when I tried to introduce him to Aileen, she hid and said,
No.
She wasn't usually shy around people, so this was unusual, and when I asked her why, she wouldn't answer. After that, whenever I brought Kyle to the house, she would avoid him and retreat to her room. I was worried about that, but something else was also bothering me. Kyle told me that his father had passed away when he was young, and since he didn't have much contact with other relatives, his only family was his mother. But he said I couldn't meet his mother.
She just had major surgery and isn't allowed visitors.
That's concerning.
He explained that the surgery hadn't gone well, and his mother was given only 6 months to live.
That's why I want to get married soon and give my mom some peace of mind.
Although I had planned to wait a bit longer before getting married, after hearing this, I decided to go ahead with the wedding.
I need to ask you something. I want my mom to live as long as possible, so I'm planning to get her some expensive advanced medical treatment.
That sounds like a good idea.
I have a CD account so I can cover the costs, but it doesn't mature for another month, and withdrawing it now would mean losing some money.
Is that how it works? I'm not really familiar with these things.
I'll pay you back as soon as the account matures next month, but could you lend me the money for now? I'll write you an IOU, of course.
Given the circumstances, I lent him $20,000. The following days were busy with choosing a venue, picking out wedding outfits, and looking for a new home and honeymoon destination.
I'd prefer to live near my parents' place if possible. Is that okay? I'd hate to be far from Aileen.
I love that you're so caring, Nina. Let's try to find a place nearby.
Thank you.
Should we keep the honeymoon domestic? My passport is up for renewal, and it might take some time.
That sounds good. There are plenty of great places to visit here too.
There were many decisions to make, but the days were filled with happiness and joy. Kyle assured me that he would handle the payments for the new house and honeymoon expenses as soon as his CD matured, so I felt confident leaving it to him. I paid the $1,000 deposit for the wedding expenses, and the remaining balance was to be paid after the ceremony. Given that I had many guests from the publishing industry, as well as friends and relatives, I decided to cover the entire cost myself. I didn't mind doing so considering all the wedding gifts we would receive in return. As for Kyle's guests, he mentioned that only about 10 people would attend, including his mother, some relatives, his boss, and a few friends. I was surprised by how few there were.
Are you okay with only those people? I'll have about 150 guests.
I only invited the people who would genuinely be happy about my marriage. Since you have so many guests, it's okay if my side is smaller, right?
I suppose so. I'm sorry, I just have so many work-related people. Should I narrow down my list?
No, you should invite as many as you want. That way, we'll get lots of wedding gifts too, right?
What?
Oh, I'm just kidding. I meant that I want lots of people to see how beautiful you look.
Kyle offered to get the marriage registration form from the city hall after the wedding. Finally, the big day arrived. As I walked down the aisle in my wedding dress, hand in hand with Kyle, I was overwhelmed with happiness as the guests applauded us. However, Aileen suddenly ran up and blocked our path. With a serious expression, she pointed at Kyle and shouted loudly,
You shouldn't marry this guy.
I was shocked and momentarily flustered by her sudden outburst at such a joyful event, but then I noticed that her serious eyes, normally brown, were tinged with a bluish hue. Whenever she displayed her mysterious behavior since she was 2, her eyes would always take on this color. Her slightly bluish-brown eyes seemed to draw me in.
I have to listen to what Aileen has to say.
That's what I instinctively felt. My brother hurried over, trying to pick her up and take her away, but I stopped him.
Why shouldn't I marry him?
Because the lady and a child living with him together are crying. They're hungry. They're saying they don't have any money.
Hey, I'm single.
The idea that he might be married with a child was shocking, but I couldn't believe Aileen would lie.
and he's taking money from some other old ladies and men. They're angry and want it back.
What?
And the money Nina gave you, did you lose it all at the casino? Why?
How could she possibly know that?
The money I had given him was supposed to be for his mother's advanced medical treatment. Could he have gambled it away? As Aileen continued to speak, Kyle's face grew paler and paler.
What is this kid saying? This is creepy. Stay away from me.
Seeing how agitated he was, I was certain that what she was saying was true. Aileen added one more thing.
This man is planning to run away with lots of things.
When I thought about that at the wedding, the only thing that came to mind was the wedding gifts. I quickly asked the friend who was handling the reception, and she told me that Kyle had taken the gifts, saying he'd take care of it. Upon hearing this, my brother hurriedly brought Kyle's bag from the waiting room. When we checked inside, we found all the gift envelopes gathered together and a lot of expensive gifts in his luggage.
You were planning to run off with the wedding gifts, weren't you?
No, I was just holding on to them so I could give them to Nina later. That's all it was. I wasn't planning to run off with them.
Kyle's desperate pleas of innocence echoed through the hall, but they fell on deaf ears. At first, some of the guests were confused and didn't understand what was happening, but as they listened to our exchange, they quickly turned against Kyle. To make matters worse, photos of his wife and child and a driver's license with his real name were found in his bag.
Kyle, your name is different. What's going on?
Realizing he could no longer talk his way out of this, he tried to make a run for it, but a relative sitting nearby managed to restrain him.
Dad, call the police.
As I shouted, Kyle shook off the relative's grip and fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness.
I'm sorry for deceiving you. It was just a moment of weakness.
That seems a bit too well planned for just a moment of weakness.
My daughter really does love Nina's books. Can't you forgive me for that?
The strange feeling I had when I first thought it was unusual for a single man to love children's books turned out to be correct. It was his child's influence all along. I must have been an easy target for Kyle.
Please, don't call the police.
The police are already here.
What?
Just as my brother said that, several police officers entered the venue. They grabbed Kyle, who was still on his knees, and dragged him away.
No, I don't want to go to jail. Nina, help me.
I could only stand there, stunned, as I watched the pitiful man being taken away. I was surprised at how quickly the police arrived, but it turned out that Kyle had been under investigation for defrauding elderly people, and they had been monitoring him. Once they confirmed the charges, the police showed up at the wedding. What's more, all of the few guests Kyle had brought were actually hired strangers. Since they hadn't yet been paid by Kyle, they began to complain that things weren't what they had expected, and the police had to question them about that as well. In the end, the wedding was canceled, and we apologized to the guests and returned all the wedding gifts. Thanks to Aileen, I learned the truth about Kyle, and I'm endlessly grateful to her. After all the commotion settled down, she fell asleep in my brother's arms, exhausted from saving me with all her might. Kyle was sentenced to prison, where he is now serving time. I filed claims for the $20,000 he swindled from me, the $40,000 wedding cost, and $20,000 in damages for the marriage fraud. He also ended up divorcing his real wife, who is now claiming alimony and child support from him. Moreover, others whom he had deceived are also demanding repayment. Even after he gets out of prison, Kyle will face a mountain of debt. To ensure he doesn't run away before paying it off, my uncle, who works in deep-sea fishing, has agreed to take Kyle under his wing and train him. It's likely going to take a long time. I've settled back into a peaceful life at home once again. Honestly, I'm relieved because the thought of living apart from Aileen was sad, so this might be for the best. Recently, I happened to run into an old neighborhood friend while walking my dog.
Nina, you're going to marry this man.
Aileen suddenly declared, surprising me. Considering how well I know him and the fact that I can stay close to her, it might not be a bad idea. Most importantly, if she approves of him, I'm sure he's the right choice. We've just started dating, and things are going well so far.